Hi, and welcome to iTenif Healthcare Solutions webinar, NextGen Spring Release 6.2021.1, Features and Functionality Overview. This is obviously a webinar that we, and apparently you all, are incredibly excited about. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chelsea Grover, and I'm the Marketing Communications Manager for iTenif. Before we dive into today's webinar, I wanted to take a moment to explain the process for the presentation. First, I'd like to mention this webinar will be recorded, and that we'll send out a copy of the slides and the recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with iTenif, I wanted to take a minute to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in next-gen healthcare, and we're passionate about providing solutions for our healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything next-gen. And we also have some next-gen add-on productivity solutions, including ChartGuard, Refund Manager, Unapplied and Deposit Manager, and Multiple Encounter Billing Manager. And speaking of ChartGuard, I wanted to mention some upcoming webinars. On April 13th, we'll be presenting a live demonstration of this powerful next-gen downtime solution that automatically creates PDF copies of your patient charts, ensuring that you always have access to them, even during a system outage. And on April 24th, we'll be presenting another educational webinar on the background business processor best practices. So keep your eyes out to invitations to both of those webinars, and we hope to see you there. Okay, so back to today's webinar on the NextGen Spring Release. At the end of the presentation, we'll open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. I also want to mention this webinar is full of lots of information. It's very likely that the presentation itself will run up nearly until the end of the hour, but that we'll stay on longer to go through all the questions. And we'll go through them in the order that we receive them. So if your question is specific to something that we've just covered, you may want to reference that section that the topic relates to in your question. And if you have to drop off early before we get to your question, those questions will be included in the copy of the recording that we'll be sending out. So you can always jump to the end to view those as well. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions may be entered in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Lindsay Lanning is Manager of Client Development and has been studying everything she can on the spring release and is eager to share her knowledge with everyone. And Lexi DeMarsh is Manager of Consultant Development and one of our resident experts, so thus is in a great position to take us through all of this. So Lexi, let's jump right into it. The webinar is all yours.
All right, thank you so much, Chelsea. And thank you to all of you for being here today. We're going to go through and explore NextGen Spring Release, which is otherwise known as version 6.2021.1. So this release is really full of brand new features. We'll see a lot of enhancements, some of our existing functionality. And what I always personally think is cool to see, we'll see several features that were actually requested by users just like you through the Ideas Board and Success community. So like Chelsea said, we have a lot of content to cover today. So without further delay, let's jump right in. So we're going to begin our review of the changes that you can expect in the spring release with our EHR application. So as you can see from our agenda here, we have a lot of great EHR features to review. So let's get started. So the first update that we will take a look at involves the current gender SOGI field. So that field is found in our patient demographic window. And we now have an additional option in our dropdown for unknown. So this was something that did need to be added to the EHR in order to be compliant with what is called the 21st Century Cures Act. Our next enhancement is a continuation of a process of updating all of our templates from that classic KBM format to what we now know as our Adaptive Content Engine, or our ACE architecture. So this is something that we have seen updates for from the past couple versions. For example, we currently have a SOAP template that was previously updated to this format. So now in the spring release, as you can see on the screen, we will see that the intake template has been updated. We will also see from this screenshot that the well-child SOAP template was also converted, so again, to that new ACE architecture. So what exactly do I mean by that, ACE architecture or template format or whatever you want to call it? So the first and most noticeable change that we saw again with that SOAP template previously, but now with the intake and that well-child SOAP template, is that our panels that we are used to seeing on our templates are now being replaced with what are called cards. So cards basically are just used to kind of organize the various pieces of information that need to be captured in a visit. So, for example, we'll have a card for the reason for visit or vital signs, things like that. So kind of similar to the functionality that the panels had. So these cards, they can be added as well as rearranged on our templates. And that will happen in our new enhanced configuration system practice template. So we'll have the ability on these templates at the user level to have certain preferences. So one feature that I know has been very highly requested is the ability to zoom on the text of a template. So users can expand the size of that font to make it a little easier to see. As well as users have the ability to view the cards in either one column, so kind of similar to how we saw our panels before, or even two columns. As well as users can expand and collapse individual cards, so just depending on what they would like to see. We also have a new general information section. So this is going to display at the top of our new templates. This is going to give us some of the functionality that we had in our previous general panel. So things like documenting a historian, if it's a transition of care, interpreter use, things like that. As well as we can mark if education was provided to the patient, as well as some other checkboxes. We'll also see in this general information section that a button has been added, and that's going to allow us to generate that intake note. It's just going to save users some time of not having to scroll down to the bottom to see that button. So here on our ACE templates, we will also see the ability to add up to 3 what are called client buttons, as well as 3 client checkboxes. So we can add up to 3 per card. So each card, again, a card could be like the reason for visit, can have 3 separate buttons as well as 3 separate checkboxes. So those client buttons, they can be configured to link to other templates. For example, like here on Reason for a Visit, we added buttons to take us to the immunizations template as well as screening tools. These are in addition to that normal sub-navigation link that we have at the top of the template. So this allows us to really customize even further, again, for one particular card. So in addition to these client buttons, each card can also have up to 3 checkboxes. So these checkbox labels can be customized, so you can really display whatever information that you want, to be able to track, for a particular card, as well as when that box is then checked by a user, you can determine what the verbiage would be in the documentation. So if a user checks that off, then it will show on the template, but also as well as in that visit documentation that's generated at the end. So both our client buttons and our checkboxes are configured on the Framework Content System Practice template. So another update that we will see with our new ACE template format is on the Reason for Visit card. So that additional manage link that we've seen previously has actually been removed. And instead, that is replaced with our Select HPI dropdown. So in the Select HPI dropdown, users are actually able to search. So for additional HPIs, so beyond those, that are configured in that list by the practice, they can just search by keyword to find the reason for visit that they're looking for. Another feature that was changed when looking at our HPIs is how we remove those. If we select the wrong one or change our mind. Now all a user has to do to remove a reason for visit that was previously selected is just actually hover over that reason directly on the template, and then they will see a delete button that they can click. So in the spring 21 release, we will also see the introduction of a new document. So this is called our APSO document. So practices, this is optional if they want to choose to incorporate this into their workflow. So APSO stands for Assessment Plan Subjective and Objective. So this document basically provides a summary of all the details that are documented during the visit. So some of you might be saying, doesn't this kind of sound like the master document? So you're not wrong. It is similar to the master document, but it organizes the information in a way that the most relevant clinical data is at the top of the document. So as we know, that master document really has to contain a lot of details, for purposes like it's the legal record, as well as for billing, things like that. So this is just another way to organize it from kind of a clinical perspective. So that being said, however, I do want to point out that this APSO document can be used in addition to, but does not replace the master document. So we'll see that this new APSO document can be configured to automatically generate. So this can happen alongside that master document. For example, if a practice has it set up to generate when the encounter is finalized. Users will also have the option to view this document on demand. So this would be done by accessing what's called the APSO view bar. So this bar is actually replacing the quick view bar that we've seen in previous versions. So that bar used to be used to generate the master document. It's now kind of being repurposed to allow users to view the APSO document. So this view bar is going to have two tabs for the user. The first is the current APSO view. So that's going to show the APSO document for what has been documented for this current encounter. So you can kind of use that to preview and see the information kind of in a different format. There'll also be a tab for previous APSO. So clicking this tab is going to allow a user to kind of quickly see clinical data, and that's going to be from the patient's previous encounter. So if a user does want to view this information, they would open this bar in the EHR by going to the View menu, and then they would select the APSO view bar. So our next enhancement in the EHR is the ability to customize the assessment and plan links. So it's that link that we find at the bottom of our SOAP template. So when we open that assessment and plan window, and we have our tabs along the top. So we now have the ability to customize, so not only the links for those tabs, but also the caption, so exactly how they read, as well as the order. So, for example, maybe users at your practice aren't typically using the My Plan feature. So we actually now have the ability to remove that altogether from that pop-up window if we choose to. So these options are configured on a new panel that was added to our framework content system practice template. So as with all of our other items in our framework content template, this customization to this navigation is specific to specialty. It can be specific to practice, and even to an individual provider. So you can really choose how granular you want to be in the setup of this assessment and plan window. So in addition to some of those template changes that we just reviewed, there are also several modules that will receive some new features and some enhancements in this spring release. So the first module that we are going to take a look at is our medication module. So with this upgrade, we are going to see the expansion of that PDMP feature in the module. So prior to the spring release, you had the ability to check your state's PDMP, which is the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, and you could do that directly within the medication module. So there was a little caveat to this. This did require integration with APRIS Health. So not all practices wanted to set up that integration, and there's not all states are even participating. So in order to allow all practices, regardless of state, to capture in the EHR that the PDMP was checked, a new button has been added. So that's our PDMP viewed via the state portal button. So clicking that button here in the medication module is going to mark that that PDMP was checked, as well as if I hover over that button, then I can see the last user who viewed the information, as well as the date and time. The next enhancement to our medication module that we will see is really going to help users with managing those electronic prior authorizations. So with this upgrade, that supporting documentation that might come along with our prior auths can now be uploaded, so by the practice, as well as downloaded from the PBM, all within the medication module. So in order to upload that supporting documentation to the PBM or pharmacy benefit manager, in the medication module, the user would click the Manage EPA button, and that's going to open up our request window. So they'd find the particular request, and then we'll see a new section that's been added that will allow us to attach supporting documentation. It is important to note that in order to see this section and be able to upload that documentation, we do first have to have a request from the PBM for that documentation. So kind of on the flip side, in addition to uploading that documentation, there may be attachments that were sent from the PBM to the practice. So this would typically happen along with a denial. So you may need to download and view these documents to get more information. So a user would download the documentation by clicking on that Manage EPA button in our medication module. Now we'll see a section for attachments that will let us know that something was added with this prior authorization. And we would be able to accept and then download those attachments. Once we've downloaded that document, it is going to be saved to the encounter in the patient's chart in which that EPA was first initiated. Users can also view that document within the medication module itself. So in order to do that, there is a new prior auth document column that would need to be added in the medication module grid. The last new feature that is found in the medication module in this upgrade is the addition of a check mark. This check mark is going to allow a prescriber to mark renewal requests as prohibited for a particular prescription. So we'll find this checkbox in our additional prescription detail window, as you can see in our screenshot. One thing that I do want to point out, that when you are checking this box and then sending the prescription, it does send that request as a note to the pharmacy, but it will not prevent pharmacies from actually sending renewal requests. So it's more of a request that they don't send those, but it won't necessarily stop them. So in this upgrade, we also found several modifications that were made to our medication allergies module. So these modifications needed to be made for some new regulatory requirements. So the first is a new field that was added, and this allows documentation of a verification status. So this status needs to be completed to basically say if a patient, once you were discussing a particular allergy, whether they confirmed the allergy and the reactions and everything listed is correct, if they refuted any of the information, or if it was unconfirmed. So I did want to point out, as this is the new field, that going back, any allergies that were documented before you upgrade will have a status of unconfirmed. Additionally, to be compliant with some new documentation requirements for allergies, any allergies that are deleted after the upgrade will receive this delete record pop-up, and it's required to either mark the allergy as inactive or entered in error. So if any allergies that have been deleted after the upgrade, we're going to be able to easily view those within our module by clicking our new deleted items button. So our next module that we're going to review has a feature that I know a lot of you are probably jumping for joy over. So that is our ability to reconcile and also import our lab results into the orders module. So from some kind of outside document like a CCDA, hospital record, whatever it may be. So I'm going to pause now for a second. You can do all your loud cheering. I know that's going on your end. But no, really in all seriousness, this is a feature that is really going to save users, I think, a lot of time, as well as, what's really important is making sure that your practice has all the clinical data that's available and have it, there where the users need to see it and grab it quickly. So you're going to find that the process for reconciling our lab results is going to be the same as, our other items, so things like our allergies and our medications. So there is a tab that will be added to our clinical reconciliation module, as well as a button directly in the orders module as well. And just like our other pieces of information that's imported, from an outside record, you do have the ability to restrict for, a particular group of users, the ability to modify, view, work with the imported results. And that is a new system admin right. So under that discrete data import, there's a new right specifically for results. So on our order summary tab of our module, there will be a new imported filter. So that was added to basically allow users to kind of quickly see only the reconciled orders on that order summary tab. As well, here in our screenshot, we can see on the results tab that a new checkbox was added, and that is going to allow users to hide imported results. So with those two features, we can kind of narrow down, what was actually ordered and resulted with your practice versus what was brought in from an outside source. So in our Spring 21 release, we're also going to see several enhancements to the care guidelines feature. So the first change that we're going to see is that our care guidelines 2.0 is now going to be included in our core ACE packages going forward. So this is really going to simplify things. It's going to eliminate those standalone packages, need to be separately installed and maintained, things like that. So when your practice does, upgrade or, a patch is released, it's going to be a lot simpler because it's all going to be included in one core package. In this version, we're also going to see some new options that were added. It's going to help make marking care guidelines as complete kind of even simpler for users. So the way this was done was by adding care guidelines as a code system to our coded results mapping system practice template. So this is going to give practices the ability to designate specific fields on templates. So, check boxes, drop downs, things like that, radio buttons. And those fields, when they're selected, can now mark a specific care guideline item as complete. So there are a few of these that are set up out of the box for you. Like for example, we have source tables here for the tobacco use. So basically whenever, if you select for tobacco use in that social history panel, either no, never, or yes, they're a tobacco user, that will then update the tobacco use care guideline. So another enhancement that's really going to help users with maintaining, those care guidelines is the ability to configure scan documents to be able to complete a care guideline. So this can really eliminate that need to kind of manually reconcile. For example, maybe a mammogram was done outside of your practice and that report was scanned into NextGen. So now we can actually go into our care guideline setup system practice template. And we can set up, for example, that mammogram to complete the mammogram care guideline. So our first step in setting up to use this feature on that care guideline setup template is to enable the feature. So once you have turned on that ability, your next step would be to configure for all of the document types which care guidelines they would satisfy. So I did want to point out that you can have multiple document types linked to one care guideline item, as well as kind of the reverse. You can have multiple care guideline items linked to one document type. So it's really what's going to fit your practice's needs. You can use your existing document type configuration for this feature, keeping in mind, however, that all of the document types that are going to be used to update care guidelines do need to have a required field of date of service. So the reason for that being is when that care guideline is marked as complete, that completed date will pull from the date of service for that file document. So instead of it being the actual scan date, which could really vary from the date that the service was actually completed. So in this release, we're also going to see a kind of helpful indicator added to our care guidelines, and that is for lab results. So if I hover over this indicator, it will show me if there is data for the last lab result, as well if there's any flags. So for example, if it was abnormal, I can see that. So these results, they can come from either the orders module or even if a historical result was added. It is important to note that these indicators are only visible on our page view of our care guidelines window. And then the last update to care guidelines is another feature that I know has been highly, highly requested. So that feature is the ability to have some more control over setting those intervals for guidelines. So, we have our standard intervals that we're used to seeing, so, every 6 months, 1 year, whatever it may be. But we now have a new options link. So that's going to allow intervals first based on the calendar year. So when the guidelines are marked as complete, anytime during that calendar year, so January 1st to December 31st, they will then become due again on January 1st of the next year. So regardless of when that happened in the previous year. We also will see an option that we previously had to make a guideline due once. And then finally, we have the ability to configure a guideline to mark as complete during a defined season. So a great example I can think of this would be, a care guideline for a flu shot. So you can mark that guideline for that influenza vaccine, just for example, is due from, let's say, October to March. So regardless of when the patient actually receives that vaccine, so if they received it in November or closer to the end of March, that guideline will become due again that next October. So it really gives you a lot more control over those due dates, so you're not getting duplicate care guidelines popping up when they shouldn't be. And then the last set of our new EHR features that we have to review are aimed at expanding the functionality of virtual visits within the EHR application. So the first new virtual visit feature is the ability to schedule on-demand virtual visits without having to actually leave the EHR. So you know how it is now, instead of having to go into the PM application or even to go separately into the audit website, users will now have the ability to go to the file menu within the EHR. They can select new and then schedule on-demand NextGen virtual visit. So this is going to then open NextGen's virtual visit website, and then the user can schedule that appointment, and then it will send the link to the patient just like it currently does. And then, just like we see with any of our typically scheduled virtual visits, that appointment will be added then to the appointment book. So you still have all the same functionality, to track it, report on it, whatever you need to do. So this feature is ready to be used out of the box without any configuration. But I did want to point out that there is a preference that was added in System Administrator under our Universal Preferences. And this will be defaulted to that URL for the NextGen Virtual Visit website. But again, this is done for you, so you aren't required to make any changes in there to use this feature. And another great virtual visit feature that we'll see is the ability to join that virtual visit directly within the EHR application. So, instead of having to go find the link in an email or go to the virtual visit website, a new virtual visit icon can be added by the practice to our patient information bar. So once the patient is checked in for their visit, this camera icon that we can see in our screenshot, when we hover over it, it will show Join Virtual Visit. Then the provider or any other user that typically starts that visit, they can click on that icon and join the visit. One thing I did want to point out about using this icon is if a provider is remoted in to access NextGen, so if they're using an RDP, for example, they may have trouble connecting directly to the virtual visit link through this button. So in that case, they can still use this functionality, but instead they would right-click on the icon and they'll get a pop-up that says copy link. Then they would just paste that into a web browser. So it is a few more steps as opposed to just clicking the icon, but still, saves them some time, to search for that link. So in the spring release, we're also going to see several enhancements to our virtual visit documentation. So as far as documentation, as well as our billing functionality. So the first is the addition of 2 new visit types. So it's our virtual visit telephone and virtual visit video. So these visit types are going to be available by default for all specialties. We also have a new system practice template for our virtual visit payer configuration. So this template is going to allow a practice to configure all those, kind of payer-specific requirements for our virtual visit billing. For example, they might require a specific place of service code or a modifier that needs to be used. So I know that a lot of practice may have already created, some custom SIM codes or another way to kind of, deal with those billing requirements. So you can continue to use those if it's working for you, or this new system practice template. I did want to point out that you don't need to set up both. And then finally, our last enhancement for the virtual visits has to do with our finalized template. So that template has been modified to include a new virtual visit billing panel. So that panel is going to be automatically enabled and expanded whenever the 2 new virtual visit types are used on an encounter. So here we can see what that virtual visit billing panel would look like. So it's going to allow for some additional documentation of things that need to be captured, like the provider's location, the patient's location, as well as the provider visit time. And then we can also submit our virtual visit specific E&M codes. So that includes all of the EHR features that we had to review. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay, and she's going to walk us through some of the enhancements we can expect to see with our PXP, otherwise known as our Patient Experience Platform portal.
Great, thank you, Lexi. Now, before we jump into the new features of the PXP portal, I wanted to take a minute to take a step back and review briefly what all is available once your practice transitions to that new PXP portal. So it has functionality such as secure messaging, appointment request, you're going to see patient self-scheduling, medication refill request, the health record and health forms, as well as bill pay. And most importantly, I want to point out that the Patient Experience Platform portal is the only supported portal with version 6.2021.1 and higher. This means that the transition to the new portal will need to be included in your upgrade plan. And I hope I am not the first person you're hearing this from. So the good news is the updates we see for the PXP portal in this new release are really geared towards replicating the workflows of the legacy portal that your staff are already familiar with. In addition, there are some great enhancements to simplify the portal on both the practice and the patient side. So we provided kind of an overview of this agenda, but let's go ahead and take a look at these features right away. So the first update for the portal is the redesign of the patient portal icons we're used to seeing for the legacy portal. So the icons will show user statuses like the patient's not enrolled, if they're pending, or if their enrollment has been completed, as well as if the patient, of course, was deactivated or if the account was deleted. So along with the new icons, the enrollment process for the PXP portal really couldn't get much simpler than this. The new portal no longer requires tokens for enrollment. Instead, the patient will actually click on the enrollment link that's sent to their email inbox, and then they're going to answer a few demographic questions to verify who they are. So this enrollment can actually happen in two main ways, either automatically or manually. So technically, during the upgrade process, there is a third option here to enroll your patients in what we'll call bulk through basically a utility that'll help transition patients from the old portal to this new portal. So it's up to your practice whether you want to take this approach or use one of the options we're about to review to enroll patients over a longer time period. So the first set of options for enrollment happens automatically and requires no additional steps on the practice's end. So first, patients can be automatically enrolled when certain required demographic fields are added or updated for a patient. These fields are last name, first name, date of birth, birth sex, zip code, and then of course, email address. Now the email address piece is something I know may not be consistently collected by your practices right now. Our recommendation would be to start the process of collecting and verifying those email addresses as soon as possible. So whether you plan to upgrade right away or down the road, you're going to be ready and you're going to be in a better position. I will say NextGen has announced plans to post general release to offer text-based enrollment in addition to email. So that is something to keep in mind. I'm sure patients are more than willing to give their mobile phone number versus their email address, but I would start collecting those email addresses now if possible. The next automatic option is when an appointment is created. Again, the patient would have to have all of the required demographic fields completed before the appointment is then saved to the schedule. If a patient needs to be manually enrolled, it is as simple as clicking a link. As I mentioned on the previous slide, tokens are no longer needed. So clicking on Enroll Now from either the patient information bar or the patient portal menu in EHR and PM is really all it takes. So if the patient has a status other than not enrolled, it'll show by hovering over the icon or opening that patient portal menu as well. Now, depending on the patient's enrollment status, when the portal icon is clicked, the user will see an enrollment window with more details. If the patient has not been enrolled, a confirmation window will replace that Manage Portal Enrollment window we saw with the legacy portal. If any required demographic information is missing for a patient, a warning will show and give the user the chance to update that information. And then if an invitation was sent, but the patient has not responded, the pending enrollment window will show and let you know the enrollment was actually sent out. Finally, if the patient does not respond to an enrollment invitation after 24 hours, the user will be given the opportunity to actually manually resend that invitation. And another option for a practice is to actually automate the resending of those invitations after a specified number of days, which is extremely handy. And then the final option for enrollment is to add 2 new autoflow sequence items for patient portal enrollment. One for not enrolled and then one for that pending status. So these windows will either prompt the user to enroll the patient or view their pending enrollment details. So all in all, I'm just hearing no excuses for extremely high MIPS patient access measure numbers. Have to bring something regulatory into it. But the next enhancement for the PXP portal that we'll cover is probably one that will be the most beneficial in transitioning your users to the new portal once you upgrade. So that feature is the true integration of the PXP portal into the inbox on the patient portal tab. So if you're not familiar, the current version of the PXP portal sends notifications to the clinical tasking tab and then requires users to actually open a template to manage their messages. The new functionality will mimic the legacy portal with the ability to manage those messages, respond to prescription refills, and even appointment requests from that actual patient portal tab. Now in the inbox, messages can be composed and sent to the portal. So standard messages can continue to be used at both the user and practice level. In addition, routing rules can be created to allow the use of aliases when replying to messages and, of course, to assign work groups. So this routing will be configured in the PXP portal integration tool. The existing message routing rules master file is going to be removed after upgrading, but NextGen has announced that they are currently working on the routing rules migration tool, so that will eliminate the configuration needed when transitioning. Now, the ability to send bulk messages to patients has also been incorporated into the PXP portal with this upgrade. So on the patient portal tab, when configuring a bulk message, users will have the options they were used to seeing with the legacy portal, such as adding recipients from a report, using standard responses, adding attachments, as well as blocking replies, and using the delayed delivery feature as well. In addition to the inbox, bulk messages can also be created and sent from the practice portal. So this method has a lot of the same features as using the inbox, such as that standardized messaging and that delayed delivery feature. There are some additional options, however, that a practice may find beneficial. So for example, recipients can be added to a bulk message based on the search results of a demographic search with criteria such as age, gender, or even city or zip code. Additionally, attachments can be added for all recipients or even specified for certain users as well. After upgrading to the spring release, users will also find that the ability to respond to prescription refill requests has been brought back to that patient portal tab. So under the prescriptions tab, users can approve, reject, and of course respond to those requests. And responses to these prescription refill requests can also be saved to the patient's chart. And then in addition to messaging and prescription refills, appointment requests will now also be routed to the patient portal tab. Now keep in mind, practices have the ability to accept appointment requests or allow patients to actually self-schedule. Patient self-scheduled appointments will not show in the inbox. These appointments are added directly to the appointment book and do not require any intervention from the practice. For any request, they will be found under the appointment section, and the appointment search ahead feature can actually be used to schedule the appointment directly from the message in the inbox. Another feature of the PXP portal that we will see further integration for is bill pay. So if you're not familiar, in the current PXP portal, payments that come from the portal currently are routed to a system practice template in the EHR. From that template, a batch is then created that can be managed and posted from the PM application. The process found in the portal after the spring release will actually replicate the workflow found in the legacy portal to automatically send those payments to a batch in PM. So portal payments can come from several sources. The first is by a patient actually clicking the pay bills icon when they're logged into their portal. But there are also some other options such as pay now. That's actually available to patients before they even log in to their portal account. We also have practice portal payments and pre-check payments, which are mainly balances and copays. In addition to automatic payment batches, statements are now supported in the PXP portal. So when a statement's available for viewing in the portal, the patient's going to receive a secure message notification in their email. They are then going to log into their portal account and view the statement. Patients can also view and download previous statements as PDF documents, very similar to what you'd expect if you're downloading your credit card statements. Patients will have the ability to choose the format in which they would like to receive statements, so they can choose electronically, by paper, or both if your practice does choose to allow both. So here's an example on the screen of what a patient would see when they log into their portal account to view a statement. They can preview the statement as well as print or download it to their computer. Pretty standard and very user-friendly. Now, there are several steps that are required to be completed before statements can be viewed in the PXP portal. So first, and this may sound a bit obvious, but statement parameters need to be configured in the practice management application. Once that's complete, MedFusion Pay needs to be enabled in Site Generator. Next, statement options are set up under Online Bill Pay in the Site Generator. And then finally, the folder or the network path where statements will temporarily be stored before they're sent to the portal needs to be added to universal preferences. This is an important piece of the configuration that, if it's forgotten, are going to prevent statements from being visible in the portal. Now, prior to the spring release, the PXP portal had some limited functionality for sending items to the portal from the EHR. After upgrading, the list of what can be sent, it has been greatly expanded to include all those things you see on your screen, from patient education, EHR documents, referral letters, lab results, and even instant medical history forms. So these items are sent to the patient's email as a secure message with attachments now. And once a document or an image or lab results, whatever it may be, has been sent to the portal, it will have a sent to portal indicator in the history toolbar. So this can help users, quickly identify what has previously been sent to the portal. Now, the workflows to send items to the portal from the EHR will mirror what is available in the legacy portal. So these include using, the patient education browser, right-clicking on an item in the history toolbar, using custom print and send, sending as an attachment to a portal message, or even from the PAQ. Now, the final enhancement found in the PXP portal is the ability to receive a delivery failure notification for messages that were sent to the portal. So this notification will come as a message in the communications category of that patient portal tab in the inbox. A column has also been added to the outbox folder to allow users to quickly see messages that failed to send as well. So the notifications are sent on an hourly basis. Don't worry, if a bulk message was sent, the user's not going to get, inundated with 40 failure messages. If any of those messages fail to reach a patient that were included in that bulk message, one notification will be sent that includes all the patients that didn't receive that message in a nice clean list. So that is it for me. I will go ahead and turn it back over to Lexi to take us through the Enterprise PM new features.
So thank you, Lindsay. So we're going to continue our review, as Lindsay just said, by reviewing the new features we can expect in our practice management application. So there are a lot of great enhancements. We'll see things all from scheduling, to billing, kind of everything in between. So again, for the sake of time, let's jump right in. So the first new feature that we're going to review for the PM application is one that practices who utilize that group appointments feature are going to be really happy about. So in this release, users will now have the ability to check in as well as check out all patients scheduled for a group appointment. So if you're any of those practices that use group appointments for things, maybe you have group therapy sessions or you host, workshops, this feature can really be a huge time saver. So when you're selecting that check-in/create encounter option on a group appointment in the appointment book, users will now see an option to select the group appointment, and then the user can either select all selected members from the appointment to check in at the same time, and then it will also attach that group encounter. There is also an option to only check in selected members as well, so if they'd rather go through and check them in, as people arrive for that group appointment. On the checkout menu, we will also see an option for checking out the group appointment. So again, the user can choose to check out all of the members that were checked in under that group appointment, or they can even individually select patients to check out if they'd rather do it that way. So in addition to saving time checking in and checking out that appointment, another added benefit that we'll see in this release is those check-in and check-out times will now be recorded on that encounter maintenance window, just like we're used to seeing on our encounters for non-group appointments. The next enhancement for practice management in the Spring 21 release is kind of a continuation of some modifications that have been made to how we view our insurances in the PM application. So as part of the demographic window redesign that was actually done in 5984, that insurance button that used to be there was replaced with an available insurance section. So the removal of that button, so another click was really helpful. The phrasing of that section, available insurances, often confuses users. So as I'm sure you're all familiar, that section actually shows all insurances for the patient, so not just those that are marked available. So to kind of help eliminate that confusion, that phrase available insurance is now changed to insurance listing, anywhere that we would see it in the practice management application. In addition to that, we'll also see on the insurance listing window that hidden insurances will no longer show by default. So instead, a new checkbox has been added for show hidden. So when that's checked, any of those hidden insurances will be available, and they're just going to show at the bottom of the list of insurances for the patient. In the Spring 21 release, we're also going to see a brand new pre-service cost estimation tool. So this might sound kind of familiar. There is currently a tool, but it is actually an Availity product. So it does require some separate licenses and things like that. So now this new estimated patient cost window is going to allow for cost estimation of services that are provided to patients. So it's going to show cost detail for both the patient as well as that insurance responsibility. So it can be really helpful, just make sure you're being transparent with your patients, as well as allow them, to make informed decisions about their medical care. So this estimate patient cost window can be found in a few places in the PN application. So for example, as an icon on our main toolbar, under our appointments, an encounter, both that patient and people lookup windows, under the task menu, and even as part of our autoflow sequence if you choose to set that up. So there is some configuration that may need to be done prior to using this feature, just depending on which parts of the tool you plan on using. So the first is to configure some practice preferences under our pre-services tab. So the first preference, if you do plan on collecting payments using this tool, you can come in here and you can define for your practice the percentage that a patient would have to pay if they are going to pay in advance for a service. The next preference will allow updating of the copay and deductible information for that patient's insurance based on what is returned from the cost estimation tool. The next piece of configuration is to define those transaction codes. So again, if you plan on collecting payments using this tool, there are two new options that have been added to our transaction codes and our practice preferences. So those are for our pre-service payments, as well as pre-service bad debt payments, if your practice will be collecting those through the tool. So here you can see an example of that new estimate patient cost window. So in the top left here, we have the ability to add services and then also submit them for estimation. In the top right, we can select some more details such as the provider, the location, and the service type. Once that cost estimation has been returned, you can see on the right-hand side there, we would see the details of that cost estimation. We also have buttons here to print a summary of these cost estimation details, so then that can be given to the patient, as well as payments can be made prior to the service. So again, you would set up those practice preferences we just mentioned, and then on this screen, you can click that Make Payment tool. And then our bottom section here of this window is going to show you a history of those past cost estimations for this patient. In addition to seeing them in the actual tool itself, we also have the ability to view those historical results in the patient's chart. So that would be under the Clinical History and Notes tab in our Estimation Results category. In the Spring 21 release, there are also several enhancements that are geared towards claims. So the first is the addition of two new claim edits. The first claim edit is going to check to see if a specific document has been generated for an encounter. The second claim edit will kind of work in tandem to see, not only is that document generated, but then has it also been signed off on. So you can really include both of these edits into that claim edit check for your practice. And it will kind of help you see, if required documents are generated as well as signed off, maybe catch those before, the claim actually goes out the door. So when you're configuring the required documents that need to be set up, you can choose for this claim edit any documents or reports that are being sent to the PAQ. Like any of our other claim edits, we also have the ability to configure things like the severity. For example, is this just going to be a warning? So it will let the claim be created, just kind of gives the user a heads up. As well as we can set up automated tasks. So every time that if a document's missing, a task can be created and sent to a user maybe to follow up on that document. I do want to point out that by default, both of these claim edits are disabled. So you would need to go in and turn them on and configure them if your practice does want to use them. With this upgrade, we're also going to see a redesigned claim status report. So this report is going to be in that enhanced report format. It's going to be a little easier to read, as well as be able to really drill down and see more information about individual claims. So this report can be run from our reports menu under our general category, as well as we can view all of our claim status details in the patient chart on that clinical history and notes tab. So here's kind of an example of what that new report is going to look like. So we can see that we have some fields showing us kind of summaries of the claims that were ran, the status of those, they were rejected, if they were accepted, things like that. And then we also have the ability, as I mentioned, to drill down into a specific claim and expand that and then view even more details about that claim status. In our Spring 21 release, we're also going to see the addition of a new master file. So that is going to allow us more customization of that alternate payer feature. So a new master file, payers-alt payers, was created. And basically you can configure multiple alt payers that will be associated to a single payer, or also you can create for one alt payer configuration can be applied to more than one payer as well. So any of that existing alt payer configuration that you may have already set up, that's going to automatically be migrated to this new master file. And we'll see in a second that that alt payer tab in our payer master file will still exist. It's just going to be used to configure more location-specific details. So here you can see an example of that new payer-alt payers master file. So we have two tabs here, and they allow us to enter information like for this particular alt payer, like the submitter profile library, the claim media type. We can add our ERA payer numbers here, our specific transaction codes, things like that. And then on our existing alt payer tab of that payer master file, like I said, this will kind of be repurposed to allow you to enter those specific carve-out criteria. So for things like locations, specific SIM codes, providers, things like that. And then our final feature to review for this PM application is one that I know a lot of practice can really greatly benefit from. So with this upgrade, we're actually going to see the expansion of what could be tracked in our advanced audit feature. So it's really important to be able to know what's happening in your system and when changes are being made. So the first new advanced audit feature goes along with that alt payer master file that we just reviewed. So we can see kind of any changes that were made to that master file. As well as we'll have a new category for patient portal new, and that's going to be used to record any of that PXP portal activity. We'll still have that existing patient portal audit events available, so you can view that historical information. We will also see a category added for our pre-service cost estimation tool. So basically, anytime that tool is used, that can be tracked using advanced audit. And then finally, one that I know has been personally requested a lot is the ability to track any modifications made in that provider master file. So really with the use of all these advanced audit, I'm going to give you a little more insight into what's happening within your system. So with not even a second to spare, as you can see, there was a ton of new features to cover. So I really wanted to make sure that we got through those. I know we're right at time, but as Chelsea said, we are more than happy to stay on. I can see we already have some questions that have come in. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chelsea and you can go through the questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So again, if you have questions, you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel. We're just going to go through them in the order that we received them. So, we do a few. I know that some of you will probably have to jump off as we just hit the end of the hour, but we're going to include the questions in the recording. So don't worry if you have to jump off. We're still going to answer the question, even if it shows that you already had to leave. So without further delay, let's get started. First question, for the new templates, would those apply to cardiology as well?
So these are just for the kind of standard intake SOAP and well child SOAP as of now. But I do know that they plan to expand this. So I'm sure at some point those cardiology specific templates would be included. But as of now, it's just the standard intake and SOAP templates. Okay,
perfect. Next question. Are the ACE templates editable in the template editor?
So that's actually a great question. So the answer is no. So kind of the shift to the ACE template format is to kind of prevent having those customizations you guys work so hard to create that then are sometimes lost or break when you upgrade. So as of now, there is some editing that you can make. I mentioned some like system practice templates to those ACE templates. But NextGen did announce that there is a plan to have something similar to template editor possibly in the future. But as of now, there's really kind of limited edits that can be made to the templates.
Okay, perfect. Next question. Is there any way to bypass the 4-point check on new ACE templates? On the KBM templates, we are using a template editor to bypass the 4-point check. The templates referenced in the provider and location listed in the encounter listed of the providers and locations listed on the user's 4-point check. Without the ability to use the template editor on the ACE templates, is there a way to perform this bypass?
So again, like I said, really with template editor, we can't use that currently with our ACE templates. So as of now, I would say no. But as I did mention, that may change in the future. They're, like I said, NextGen has kind of talked about potentially allowing more edits in the future. But as it stands right now, I'm not aware of a way to do that.
Lexi, before we go on, would you mind flipping forward a few more slides to get to the contact us information slide, just in case people want that up while we keep going through this? Oh, and by the way, I do want to mention, if you're interested in having us come out and help your practice train on this new upgrade, shoot us a note. We're happy to help with that as well. We do offer that in our offerings. Okay, next question. Regarding the custom assessment link or plans. Regarding the custom assessment plan links, if I've customized the lab master template, will it automatically go to the customized linked version of the template?
So yeah, you can definitely choose that under your template link. I would just choose the updated template. So if you've customized it, and overwritten, you would just want to make sure to choose the correct template. But yeah, that's a great example of the way that can be used. It can link to really any template.
Perfect. Moving on. Will clinical staff be able to see the button and select that PDMP was viewed on the state website other than the provider? So will other clinical staff besides the provider be able to see the PDMP was viewed?
So the rules for who can view and select that PDMP are still going to be the same as what they were previously when it was just APRS Health. So I'm sure what you're referencing is those roles that you need to have like as a provider in order to view it. So that would still be the same.
Okay, thank you so much. Next question, PDMP again. Do we have to click the top one to view and the bottom one to mark that we viewed, or is it only the bottom one to do both?
Okay, so I think I'm understanding the question. So that's a great question. The top PDMP button versus the PDMP viewed state portal, they're two separate buttons. So the top one would be if you are integrated with APRIS Health. Clicking that's going to have the same functionality. It's going to take you into your state's PDMP website like you normally would and mark it as viewed. The bottom one would be if you aren't integrated. So typically you're probably only going to have one button or the other. You don't need to click both. But that's a great question.
Okay, thank you. Where do the downloaded documents associated with the EPA go? Do they get saved in categories or under an encounter?
So when you do download those documents, they get saved directly to an encounter. As you know, we can have any item that's saved under an encounter also saved to a category, but that would require additional setup to your view categories. But by default, it just goes straight to the encounter.
Okay. Does the request to prohibit renewals show up in big letters somewhere for the receiving pharmacy? Some pharmacies ignore notes in the dialog box, so I wonder how different this option will be on the receiving end.
That is a great suggestion. Unfortunately, no, it's not really any larger or in bold or anything than other notes. So that is kind of like I mentioned, the one caveat is for the pharmacy to actually see that note as well as follow the instructions. But yeah, it really just adds another note like they would typically see.
Will the imported results lab be added with the source info?
Yes. Yep, you would be able to see that. Pretty typical to any importing other information. Yeah, you would definitely be able to see the source.
When the labs are imported, if there is a LOINC associated, they should add in the proper row. Will this be incorporated?
Yes, so yeah, the link codes would come with that information when it was imported. Yep, that will be added.
Okay, next question. Will the updates be available in NextGen e-learning?
So the answer is yes, but I would say typically there is a little bit of delay in getting those e-learnings created, on NextGen side and being added. I will say in the meantime, there are some great resources out there if you just go in the success community. There is, I think it's called like Path to 6.21.1 or Spring Release, and they do have PowerPoints that you can use to reference, as well as recorded videos. So that's something that's available today. You could start with maybe having your users watch those videos. And then I will say typically the e-learnings, that's kind of comes a little bit later on.
Okay, next question. How many users can join a virtual visit? Sometimes our nurses may need to get vitals before the provider enters the room. Also, sometimes an interpreter may be needed to be on a call or a family member in another location than the patient.
So as far as those virtual visits, as of now, really, you can have the, one scheduled user who's typically the provider, as well as you can have one support user, so again, like a nurse or a medical assistant, someone like that. And then there is also a feature with the NextGen virtual visits called Patient Guest Add. So it actually allows the patient themselves to add someone else into the visit. So like you mentioned, like a family member that needs to sit in, they're maybe not with the patient, a caregiver, whoever it may be. So kind of from the practice side, it's typically 2 users, and then the patient could add in another person that needs to participate as well.
Great, thank you. Next question. Will these portal enrollment features work if we're using a third-party portal?
So all the enrollment features that I mentioned were specifically with the NextGen PXP portal. So they wouldn't, to my knowledge, integrate the same way. Those are really kind of exclusive to NextGen's portal.
Great, thanks. We have a customized template we send to patients prior to a visit. Will we still be able to use those in PXP?
Yes, so yeah, you can definitely send those customized templates or forms. So there's a few ways you can do that. You can have it send alongside with the appointment confirmation. You can have it send as part of if you're going to use the pre-check feature, or you can just kind of send it as a one-off. So there's definitely ways that you can set those up, and just depending on the needs of your practice, they can again either be sent out automatically or manually as needed.
Okay, when does this release become available?
That is the million-dollar question. So we knew this was going to come. That's a great question. So NextGen actually has not officially announced the release date. To our knowledge, I mean, it's really going to be any day now. I literally checked like 20 minutes before we hopped on here to see if they had announced it. I will say any day now. Unfortunately, I can't really give you more specific than that.
And as a follow-up question to that question, is there going to be a training module made available for staff?
So again, kind of as I mentioned with the e-learnings, there are videos that are available, so the users can watch those videos. It kind of explains the features as well as gives kind of a brief demo. Again, you can find that if you just like search, spring release or 6.21.1 in the success community, you can definitely find those. And then on that same page I was mentioning before, again, it's called like path to 6.21.1. There will be other links, so as other modules and e-learnings and things like that become available, you would see those there.
Okay, claim edit tasking. Can you send an EHR task?
So the tasking is currently set up to be PM tasks for those claim edits.
Okay, EDR updates. Will the EDR system be updated, specifically the DX requirements?
So there are some dental specific updates that are coming with this application. It is kind of separate from the material that we covered today. Again, I would recommend that you go out to the success community that mentioning that path to 6.21.1. There is a whole separate set of documentation that can walk you through all of those changes coming specifically for dental. So that would be my recommendation.
Will the patient portal have a general area that lists all of the messages? Right now you have to scroll through the history bar to find each portal message.
So if you are referring for a particular patient, yeah, you can see in the patient portal tab would be messages for all patients, obviously. And then, as you mentioned, you would see them in the history toolbar. I will say that there is in the current portal, there is a system practice template that allows you to see all of the messages just for a particular patient, kind of in one place. So again, that is kind of being replaced by the patient portal tab to kind of go back to that legacy feature. But I would find it hard to believe that they're going to turn that template off. So I don't know that for a fact, but I know that there is a template that can view all of the messages at one time.
Okay, next question. For the EHR, new ACE templates with the cards and the layout that can be customized for 1 column, 2 column, and expanded or collapsed. Now with the new SOAP, it will now hold these preferences from one patient to another. Currently, the provider has to change this every time they click within the SOAP, and it's very much a concern.
So I'm assuming that was supposed to say they won't hold the preferences. So that is, they're designed to hold those preferences. So the user should be able to, just kind of like we would see with our previous, kind of classic format for our templates, expand or collapse a panel, and it remembers that. So that is definitely something that should be remembered for, the intake, well-child SOAP, the SOAP template, things like that.
Oh wait, I'm sorry.
She
did. No, I just realized she sent a follow-up question afterwards.
Will not hold. Okay.
Yeah, will not hold user preferences.
So yeah, I would say that to me would be that it's not working correctly if it's not holding those preferences. So that might be something that you do want to open a ticket for to see what's causing that, because it definitely should remember those preferences.
Okay, next question. If the customization limitations of the ACE template is a problem, is there an option to revert to the legacy SOAP soap intake, etc.?
So yes, you do have that ability now. So before you upgrade to this spring release, and you will have that ability afterwards. So you do have the option to basically link back to kind of that classic, legacy templates for any of the new template formats. So you do have that ability. You would just want to make sure that you're updating any links. Like for example, if you're on the intake tab and you click SOAP, you want to make sure in your framework contact system practice template that's linking to the correct place, just so users don't, constantly get taken to the new template if you plan on using the legacy template.
Okay, perfect. Next question. How will the changes in the patient portal affect the promoting interoperability, providing access to their health information, PIPEA1 reporting? Lindsay, that sounds like a question for you.
Yay! Thank you for asking, Barbara. So the long story short, this will not negatively affect you in any way. The new PXP portal will integrate with the NextGen HQM just as you're used to. The few things that I will point out that NextGen has recommended is that, one, when you are upgrading or doing that portal transition, you don't have your PI 90-day reporting period during that time. You want to pick a reporting period either before or after. Two, it's going to be really, really important with this patient access measure to make sure you are collecting your patient's email addresses. In the previous portal, you could click through kind of a warning here and get away with not having their email address in file. Not the case with this portal. You do need to make sure that you have your email address on file. And then, who knows, hopefully they have mentioned that they would come out with text-based enrollment as well. But the main thing here, no effect. It will integrate with the HQM to track as you're used to it. I think truly the enrollment process, like Lexi and I went over today, is a lot more streamlined and a lot easier. I would just make sure that PI reporting period is either before or after that upgrade.
Okay, great. And Lindsay, maybe you can take this one as well. I see that you typed in a response, but it's good to ask it out loud. Can you repeat the search title to find the updates in the e-learning?
Yep, I had answered this in the chat. Just want to remind everyone, Lexi mentioned the e-learnings do take a little bit longer to get added once the version's released. So if you're looking for something resource-wise to access now on the Success community, Lexi, I think you said it was called Path to 6.2021.1 would be what you'd want to search.
Yes, yep, that'll take you to the website in the Success community where they kind of link all the resources, and then as new resources are being created, documents, e-learnings, things like that, that's typically where I go for any of the new versions.
Okay, well, it looks like we might be at the end of the questions here. Oh, wait, we have one more. Will there be an additional cost to get the PXP patient portal? For that one, I'd recommend that you need to reach out to your NextGen account executive for pricing, and they can provide the information on that. And it looks like that's all the questions. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope this was beneficial. Like I've said previously, I'll be sending out a link to the slides and recording within the next week. You can always reply back to that question or with that email with questions if you think of any questions after this or after you have a chance to review it again. If you still have questions, we're happy to help. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. That's why we're here. This was a lot of information, I know. So please, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And if you'd like to, get any assistance in planning for your upgrade or anything like that as well, always reach out to us for that too.
All right, thank you, everyone.